He was a man of immense power, a plantation owner whose wealth and authority extended over acres of land, countless workers, and generations of inherited influence. Every tree, every field, every river that cut through his estate belonged to him, and with it the lives of those who lived and worked under his control. And yet, for all his power, there was one thing he could never control: his own daughter. She was his only child, a girl of flesh and spirit, yet in his eyes she was a constant reminder of imperfection. Not because she lacked potential, intelligence, or even beauty, those she possessed in abundance, but because society, and more importantly, the whispers of others, had labeled her differently. She was large, soft, and quiet, traits that made her the object of ridicule and judgment. Neighbors would gossip, servants would cast furtive glances, and even distant acquaintances would shake their heads in judgment. And each whisper, each glance, fell upon her father's pride like a heavy shadow. He saw her not as his child, but as a reflection of his own status in the world. Every extra pound, every hesitation in her step, every moment she laughed or spoke out of turn, was, to him, a personal failure. The society he had built his life to impress was unforgiving, and in its reflection he saw a crack, a flaw in the image he had so meticulously constructed. His anger grew with each passing day, a quiet, simmering rage that he could neither release nor admit to anyone else. Then one night, in a decision that would change the course of all their lives, he acted. Not with thought, not with deliberation, but with the cold finality of a man who believed power could solve all problems. He handed his daughter over to a slave. It was a decision that stunned everyone. The household fell silent. Servants whispered behind closed doors, and neighbors gossiped with disbelief. The girl, for her part, was terrified. She had lived her entire life within the boundaries of her father's wealth and authority, never truly knowing the hardships beyond the estate's walls. Now, in an instant, she was thrust into a world she had only observed from a distance, a world ruled by hard labor, harsh words, and the constant awareness that she was no longer in control of her own fate. At first, the reality was almost unbearable. Every glance from the other slaves carried a mixture of curiosity and pity. Every step she took reminded her of her vulnerability. Every moment emphasized her dependency on people she did not know or trust. Yet, amid the fear and uncertainty, something remarkable began to happen. The hardships she faced became a crucible. Each day of labor, each whispered insult, each small challenge forced her to confront herself in ways she never had before. She discovered strength she had never imagined, small acts of courage, standing up for herself, enduring the ridicule, completing the tasks expected of her, began to shape her into someone new. She learned resilience, patience, and the subtle art of influence. The very chains that were meant to confine her became the tools through which she forged her own power. Her father, oblivious to the transformation taking place, believed he had succeeded in teaching her a lesson. He had expected fear, submission, and shame. What he did not anticipate was that she would adapt, endure, and ultimately rise above the circumstances he thought would break her. Slowly, she began to reclaim her power. Not by defying anyone directly, but by mastering herself, her environment, and the subtle social dynamics around her. Every observer began to notice the change. The other slaves, the servants, even outsiders who occasionally passed through the estate, saw a quiet confidence in her that had not existed before. Her presence, once a symbol of weakness in her father's eyes, now carried a new authority. It was not loud or brash, but it was undeniable. And as she grew stronger, the balance of power within the household began to shift. Then came the moment that no one could have predicted. The father, who had once held absolute control over the lives of everyone around him, watched helplessly as his daughter emerged stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. The very chains he had used to try to humiliate her had, in truth, become the instruments of her transformation. Cruelty, power, and intimidation, all the tools he had wielded so confidently, failed against the force of her spirit. The ending was both shocking and illuminating. The girl, once mocked and shamed, now stood as a figure of strength. The slaves, who had once looked upon her with pity, now treated her with a quiet respect. Even her father, who had tried to dominate her entirely, could only watch as she demonstrated a resilience he could neither anticipate nor control. In attempting to break her, he had unknowingly created a force that would never bend. This story, though rooted in the specifics of a plantation and a family, carries a universal lesson. Power used to suppress and control is fragile. Cruelty breeds not submission, but hidden strength. And sometimes the outcomes of our actions are not those we expect. They are far greater, far more transformative, and far more revealing than anything we can plan for. Her journey was one of awakening. She had started as a girl, overshadowed by whispers and judgment, confined by both her body and society's perception of her. She became a young woman defined not by the limitations others tried to impose, but by the courage and strength she discovered within herself. And in the end, it was this discovery, this quiet mastery over her own fate, that turned what was meant as punishment into a triumph that left everyone, especially her father, forever changed. The story does not end with punishment or revenge. It ends with transformation. The father, for all his wealth and control, learned a humbling truth: authority over others is fleeting, but strength of spirit is eternal. The daughter, who had once been defined by her size, her quiet demeanor, and the judgments of others, became defined by resilience, courage, and an unbreakable will. And the world around them, which had been so sure of her weakness, was forced to reckon with a reality that no one had seen coming. In the end, the lesson is clear. Trials can create power, oppression can create resilience, and the spirit of an individual can turn even the harshest circumstances into a story of triumph. What was meant to break her instead made her unstoppable. What was intended to humiliate became the pathway to her ultimate liberation. And in that, the legacy of the plantation owner's dark decision is forever entwined with the unexpected, astonishing force of a spirit that refused to be crushed. This is not just a story of cruelty, shame, or power. It is a story of growth, endurance, and the incredible capacity of a human being to rise above adversity. It is a reminder that strength is often born from struggle, that resilience can transform lives, and that the most shocking endings are sometimes the ones written by the courage and determination of those we least expect.